Good afternoon. How's everyone? Right now, it looks like I'm the first participant. It's exactly 2 p.m. And this is the first Zoom meeting I'm having with the Village of Harlem residents so that they can get a chance to ask questions of me, to find out a little bit about me and why I'm running for city council. I'm going to record these videos so that people can look at them at their leisure. I also plan on having these meetings every Saturday at 2 p.m., regardless of where I am or what I'm doing, so that folks can ask me questions about their concerns about the direction of the community, their concerns about things that affect them, their family members, their children, and how I can help improve our district, why I am the best candidate to do so. And so I'll start with just a short introduction about who I am and why I'm running. I am first a father, son, husband, educator, public safety professional, historic preservationist, disability rights advocate, community activist. Those are a few of the hats that I wear serving the Harlem community. My formal educational background, after graduating from Howard University with my undergraduate degree, I worked while going to school part-time at City College of New York to get my first master's in sociology. I then worked while getting my doctorate from Columbia in education and got a further master's degree in national security studies from the Naval Postgraduate School. And I finished that almost 10 years ago. I presently teach as an adjunct assistant professor at John Jay College. I teach criminology. I have a work history in public safety. And it started after I spent a few years working as a caseworker right out of Howard University at Harlem Downey Westside Children's Services. I spent 3 years as a caseworker. During that time period, the community, the Harlem community and many communities were dealing with the ravages of the drug epidemic of that time. And so my role as caseworker was to try to reunify families that had been torn apart by drug addiction of the parents. And so I worked hard to get young children reunited with their parents, and that required working with the parents to help them get the parenting or drug rehabilitation or whatever programming or training or education assistance that they needed in order to be given their children back. And so after 3 years, I then joined the police department and really sort of looking to understand how policing affected our communities and ways in which it could be done as a force for good, for positive change. And I have a history of family members who have been involved in the police department. So I had good mentors, legacies to look up to in terms of my own efforts in my career. I was also at the same time, working on my doctorate at Columbia University, and had to stop for a short period of time due to the 9/11 World Trade Center attack, of which I was assigned to that as a supervisor of the missing persons squad and supervising forensic investigators who were dealing with the recovery efforts. So I spent about a year at the medical examiner's office. Before 9/11, I was an internal investigator working on integrity testing and really focusing efforts on rooting out corruption from police officers, both minor and major. Before that, I spent a period of time as a supervisor, a newly promoted sergeant in the Bronx in the 4-7 precinct. And before that, I was a detective in narcotics, buying a lot of illicit substances, not just I was assigned to the Bronx, but I also did work in Manhattan and in Staten Island as well. And so I started out in 91 as a police officer. Within a few years, I did school safety as a beat cop, then went into narcotics, was promoted to supervisor, sergeant, and I got brought into internal affairs and did that for a few years. Then went into missing persons squad in the detective bureau. Then spent, after that year, I came back. I spent a year, 93 to 95, I was in the commissioner's office as a policy analyst under his Office of Management and Budget. And it gave me a really sort of a 30,000-foot view at policing and police issues and how the police department approached those various issues, everything from budgeting to policies dealing with every aspect of policing. One of my special projects was working on the changeover of batons from wooden to expandable batons. So I did do research around that area, looking at the medical implications and the practical implications of having this updated, less than lethal option available for police officers, which was eventually adopted. I then, after doing the work in policy management, I spent about 10 years in the emergency service unit, which is a SWAT/heavy rescue unit. And it was, an opportunity to be in a position where the exceptional training that I received allowed me to assist officers who were in trouble, as well as the general public, special kinds of situations. My focus or specialization was in hazardous materials, weapons of mass destruction. And I had the opportunity to work on a FBI W&D task force. I worked with our federal partners as well as state and local partners in dealing with various types of threats, issues that came up. And this was a few years after 9/11. So there was a real focus on counterterrorism. It was during this time that I received a scholarship to get this master's degree in national security studies from the Naval Postgraduate School. And so I did that with a focus on creating a national standard for W&D response by law enforcement officers, because they have particular types of responsibilities that they have to do in a criminal incident, which a terrorist incident is. And there's also a lot of work that has to be done around different types of agencies and their functions at these types of incidents. After spending 10 years in this unit, and I was also fortunate enough to be part of a FEMA urban search and rescue team as a planning team manager for the New York City area. There are 28 in the country, and they handle obviously very large scale incidents. After doing that, I then transitioned from the police department to the corrections department. And And I used my experiences and skills that I developed in the police department to help the Department of Correction deal with reforming its efforts to address violent crimes that occurred within the correctional facilities, particularly around gang violence. And so I was the assistant commissioner in charge of the gang violence response. I did that for a number of years, and now I teach, as I mentioned at the beginning, at John Jay College, and I am feel very fortunate to talk to younger people who are considering a career in law enforcement, and I'm able to use my experiences and my academic preparation to help them understand the reality on the ground. I also talk to various news media about different subjects related to policing. And so that is a little bit about me in terms of my formal work experience. As far as my Harlem community activism, I have been involved in a number of different areas of working to make the community better. And I should really sort of start with my family history. My family came to Harlem in 1905 from Barbados, and they came looking for a better way of life, and saw the immigration to the United States and particularly Harlem as a way to do that. My grandmother was born in this country. Her parents were the ones that immigrated from Barbados. She graduated from New York City, from Harlem Public Schools, culminating in her graduation from Wadley School for Girls. I think it was called back in 1929 when she graduated. And her uncle was, in 1935, the first Black elected district leader, Democratic district leader in Harlem and in New York City. And according to his account, in the country, to be in that position. And he fought hard for housing, for decent housing, for political rights, for individuals of color to be hired in various capacities by city, state, and federal government. And all of this information is on my webpage, which is tailormadeforharlem.com, where I have specific web pages in the About section that talk about my family history, my law enforcement legacy, and a few other things. But that family history really helped to help me understand the importance of standing on the shoulders of greatness, of those who have done a lot for the community, and the responsibility to continue that tradition. And so that's part of why I'm running, because of my family legacy, past as well as current. My family lives in Harlem. I'm raising them in Harlem, and I really feel the familial connection going back over 100 years, as well as my own efforts to improve Harlem. One of the ways has been through historical preservation. Harlem is known as the Mecca for African American culture, music and arts and literature, science and education. And it is vulnerable. to being destroyed. The buildings, the homes, the places where important things happened, where important people, had a role in changing not only New York City life, but also, American life. Those things happened in this district, District 9. And so, I think that we have a real responsibility to be stewards to this history, to preserve the cultural legacy that is what Harlem is, what it represents to people all over the world. And so I for the past decade or more, been working on efforts to preserve the architectural history of Harlem, and also preserving the cultural history as well. And one of the ways I've done that is through historic preservation efforts. The area where I live, the neighborhood that I live, has been preserved at the state level, has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places based on the efforts of the community, the Block Association, which I've been president of for years. And so our efforts have led to that recognition as a state historic district for the neighborhood and a federal one. And it is my hope that the recent efforts to get the city landmarking for this same neighborhood will be successful. That is actually upcoming. On April 20th, the hearing will take place at Landmarks Preservation Commission to create this new Central Harlem Historic District, which I was fortunate to be the vehicle to get that application to LPC. I say I was the vehicle because there were a lot of people and organizations that had a hand, had a role in getting that application to LPC. I was just the person that signed at the bottom of the page, but there were a lot of folks, a lot of organizations that were responsible for it. So this historic district that has been proposed will be about 250 buildings in Central Harlem, from Adam Clayton Powell to Frederick Douglass to Edgecombe Avenue, from 136th to 140th, and will be a pretty strong statement by the community as to the importance of preservation of the architecture and the culture that is attached to that architecture of African Americans. It will be the first historic district to be named after an African American in the history of the city. Private First Class Dorrance Brooks. He was a Harlem Hellfighter who fought and died valiantly in France for this country, even as Jim Crow was the rule of the day. He is also the individual from whom the first New York City park was named after an African American in 1925, almost 100 years ago. And that is also a part of the proposed New York City Landmark Historic District. And so the park in which the first African American was named after 1925 is part of the historic district as proposed, which will also have that individual's name as the title for this historic district. That park will be a part of it. And so that is one of the things that I've been involved in terms of community efforts. As I said, Block Association president for about 15 years now for the Dorrance Brooks Property Owners and Residents Association. I've been involved in the Manhattan Council of the Boy Scouts of America and working hard to reinvigorate and energize the involvement of the Scouts in Upper Manhattan, developing more participation, more opportunities for young people in our community to participate in meaningful, wholesome activities that will really help them develop as young leaders. And so that is something that I'm currently involved in. I've worked for the past 12 years on the community board, Manhattan Community Board 10, in a variety of capacities. I was chair of Education Committee, Economic Development, Public Safety. I was first vice chair of the board. And I'm currently focusing my energies on landmarks and land use committees. I've also been the board chair of the Harlem Independent Living Center for a number of years, which is a disability rights advocacy organization, specifically based out of Harlem. They've been here for 30 years, and I believe they may be the only African-American independent living center in the state, certainly the city, and doing important work. Proud to be associated with them. I was on the board of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone for 6 years, working on local economic development, including the voting for the project, the hotel project, which is currently on 125th Street, which should really change the landscape of Harlem in terms of its tourism destination. The pandemic has been has changed a lot of plans, and so tourism for the city has been affected, and the hotel and its opening has been affected, obviously, by the pandemic as well. But I believe that as the prognosis improves for Harlem and the city, that project will get to its intended outcome, and the opening of a hotel in Central Harlem will result in other positive results in terms of economic development. I started my work in Harlem when I graduated from Howard University as a caseworker at Harlem Dowling, as I mentioned previously, focusing on reuniting families. But even back then, the state of the impact of racism and discrimination on Central Harlem, on its residents, was something that did not escape me. And I was on a radio program back in 1989, WLIB, Gary Bird, talking with other guests, an individual who was the president of the Black Psychologists Association at the time, Dr. Lyle, talking about how racism negatively affected communities of color, and how specifically in Harlem, Black families were being affected by it. And back in 1989, that conversation could have been held today. And the pandemic, I think, helped to really make things more accessible for people to see how racism, how discrimination was negatively affecting communities of color, around policing, around employment, around health outcomes. And so that is one of the things that I think is at the forefront of how society is dealing with the future challenges that are represented. You see that in police reform. You see that in an acknowledgement of lack of medical resources to communities of color that are particularly impoverished. And you see that in housing, the results of years of redlining and lack of maintenance, lack of input of resources into communities of color have resulted to the issues and the problems that we have to deal with today. And so I'm running because I believe that my experience dealing in city government at the managerial level as a commissioner for a city agency dealing with the criminal justice system, with my years of experience on entities such as the local community board, the Harlem Independent Living Center, Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, as the president of my local block association, making impacts on our community in positive ways has been my focus through all of that. And so when I look at the role of city council and I look at what the impact that the legislator from this area has to change the narrative of our community and its suffering, I see that as something that I believe I can do with great impact and great success for outcomes. And I say that based on my track record. I say that based on the skills that I've developed and the plans that I have to improve our community in areas such as affordable housing, policing, education, and most importantly, in addressing the health disparities that exist. COVID, again, has done nothing if it has not made clear the effect of years of neglect and systemic discrimination to communities of color like the village of Harlem. And so responsible leadership has to address this issue in a meaningful way. And so we see some reforms taking place, but there really needs to be responsive leadership in the position of city council to reflect the concerns and the problems that the residents in city council have. What I envision the role of city council for District 9 as one that is transparent and accountable and responsive to the concerns of community members. There should be a way to track the requests of individuals who engage the city council office to deal with issues of their concern. And we have some wonderful things that are happening in city government to address issues of quality of life and following complaint reports. But at the city council's office, that should be tied in so that whoever is in city council can be held accountable to whether they are responding to the needs of their members, the people who hired them by electing them to the position, or if they are not. And right now, I think we need strong leadership in that position. And that's what I'm bringing as a candidate. And I base that not on any claims. I base it on my past experience and work, as well as what my plans are, the visions I have for the advocacy of that position. So let me just see. I think at this point, I'm going to stop this broadcast and and we'll make it available for those who want to see. The most important thing, please go to tailormadeforharlem.com, TaylorMadeforHarlem.com to see what I've been talking about, and to think about questions that you may have for me as a candidate, what I would do, how you would hold me accountable as your representative. I have a lifelong love for this community, and I have a passion to make it better for everyone that lives here. And so I'm running based on my commitment, my dedication, my integrity as a professional and as a community activist. And so you will see more of my literature that I send out. You'll see more of me as I do outreach in various venues. And I encourage you to engage me, ask me questions about how I plan on making Harlem better. And so from caseworker to commissioner, I have been fighting hard for this community, and I will continue to do so. And with that, I will end this broadcast. Thank you. Oh, there is one thing that I do want to mention, only because it's pretty important. In terms of COVID equity, one of the things that has really been important to publicize is the availability of getting the vaccine. And through State Assembly Member Inez Dickens' office, I've gotten information about vaccines that are available to Central Harlem residents with no appointments necessary for those who are age 30 or older. And currently the Central Harlem Senior Citizens Centers has the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine available, no appointments necessary. And this is a 5-week-long program that they will have available up until it ends the week of May 3rd. The hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and this is Tuesdays through Thursdays. The location is 210 West 131st Street. It's between West 131st Street and 7th Avenue, 210 West 131st Street. And there's no appointment necessary for anyone aged 30 or older. And if you need additional information, you can contact Ms. Nina Norwood, who is the community liaison for New York State Assembly Member Inez Dickens. And the number for that office is 212-866-5809. It's 212-866-5809. And so this will continue on to May 3rd. Getting vaccines are very important for our community and for our city and for our country to get back to normalcy. And so I cannot emphasize it enough. Please take advantage of this. And with that, take care.